we can easily run into real kinds of huge ditches, pits that you can run into. Because you can look at the beginning of verse 18 and say, we know that everyone having been born of Elohim doesn't sin. And probably you've heard that taught in your Christian walk. But that's not what he's saying there. What he's saying is not that they don't or can't sin. He's saying is those that are truly born of Elohim guard themselves. And when you're guarding yourself, you don't sin. Okay? So understand the way that language, the Greek language gets written, or the Hebrew that may have been under that then got written into Greek, then got written into English, is that he's saying, look, we know that everyone that's born of Elohim doesn't sin because the one having been born of Elohim guards himself, and the wicked one doesn't touch him. Now remember, we talked about this in previous parts of this, that if you don't have something in you to work with, the wicked one doesn't have anything to do. He won't bother you. So if you're guarding yourself, if you do not have that internal thing to work with, he doesn't touch you. We call that person who gets fully to that point a tzaddik, or a righteous one. The Father of all things gives permission every now and then for Hasatan to deal with some of your things, to see where you're at. This is the baptism of fire stuff again, right? To test to see if you've, really changed in your intrinsic nature. Have you become like Elohim? The only way to know is to put you through a test. You can claim it all you want. Listen, every one of us knows people that claim this and claim that, but then when push came to shove, they didn't do it. Oh, yeah, well, I can handle this, and oh, yeah, I can do that, and oh, yeah, this is no problem. And then as soon as it happens, boom. The reality was it was not what they said it was. They didn't handle it, right? And we've seen that happen. We know that. We've seen that in ourselves. We've been so disappointed in ourselves because we talked real big, and it turned out when something really came up to test that, we failed. But the victim mentality is in complete opposition to success in any form. So if you want to consider success hearing the words, well done, you good and trustworthy servant, no victim is ever going to hear that. What's a victim? The person who points the finger, complains, and justifies. Maybe you didn't have any control over some of the things that got you to where you are now because you didn't know there were choices. A lot of you grew up not knowing you had choices. I see the heads and I know. You didn't know there were options and choices. But as soon as you knew, as soon as that revelation was given to you, as soon as that clarity came to your consciousness, you are now responsible, completely separate from all of that other stuff, for where you go from here. We're totally demotivated to do things because we still have Christianity in our heads that said it was all done for you. There's nothing to do. You don't need to do anything. As a matter of fact, if you do works, if you try to do things, boy, you're just making a mockery of what the Messiah did. No, by doing nothing, you make a mockery of what the Messiah did. The dragon was enraged and went after who? The remnant of the seed. And who are those? The ones who have some sort of spirit? Yes. The ones who have come in, their intrinsic nature has come in line with that of the Creator. And how did they do it? Two ways. They possessed the witness of Yeshua. In other words, they believe and know what Yeshua did on the earth. That's your four Gospels. And they guarded the commands of Elohim. Because what have I said over and over and over again? Now you're going to understand this in a whole different way, a deeper way, hopefully. What have I said that Torah does for you and to you? That it blesses you and it keeps you safe. Now let's focus on the third aspect. It's the transformative vehicle that transforms you in your intrinsic nature, in the essence of who you are, into His nature. So those guarding His commands, which means that they're guarding and watching over them and doing them, have changed and are changed into His nature. That's where your spirit that's in you comes into complete congruence with His spirit. And she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate it. Now let's understand what happened here. Did an outside source take her over? Possess her? No. Did it encourage her in a direction that was internally in her? In other words, the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, he played on those things. He knew she had that in her. He exposed something that was already there. He did not put it there. If it wasn't there, she would have said, what are you talking about? Yahweh said, don't do it, I'm not doing it. She said, there's never been a thought, well, but it looks good and it'll make me wise and, all this other stuff. It had to be in there. And so my whole point when he says he's led the whole world astray, he's led them in the direction they want to go. But he's led them astray and convincing them that the way you want to go is right. He wants us to be personality-wise. You bring such flavor and color personality-wise. Yes, he wants you to be that. He doesn't want a bunch of clones, but he wants your character to grow and change into his, while still maintaining the goofy, interesting, different, unique personality that's you. Because that's what makes life fun, right? We meet people and they're all so different. But he wants us to be in our nature the same. That's the fellowship of spirit. The unity of spirit is that in our nature, we would be of one nature. Individuals, unique in every possible understanding of that, good parts of being unique, but having the same nature. But see, already at the very first people, the Yetzer Hara, the whining, the complaining, the pointing the finger, the justifying, that's an evil inclination. It takes a different nature to say, yes, I did that, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry. That's not our default nature, sadly. We actually have to choose to embrace that nature. Truth is the mechanics of what the Father wants us to do, and spirit is the fullness of how it was intended. I'm going to change that now a little bit. It won't really change, but I'll word it a little differently. He says, Elohim is the fullness of the intent. In other words, Elohim is spirit. What he's saying is, I want you to, he is seeking those that will worship him in his intrinsic nature and in truth. In other words, in his character, the way he would do things. He wants you to keep the Sabbath the way he would keep the Sabbath. Eat the way he would eat. Love and treat people the way he would treat people. Do you understand what I'm saying here? He wants you to worship him in his nature, the way he would do it, and in truth. Because he says, for Elohim is spirit. So what spirit? The same spirit he's talking about in the previous verse. So it says, when the Father is seeking those to worship him in spirit, and we know Elohim is spirit, then he's talking about his nature. He wants us to worship him in that character, in that essential state of being. So it's still the fullness of intent. He always intended that we do all of these things the way he would do it. And sent us Yeshua to show us how to do it. So I'm not changing anything. I'm hopefully giving it more fullness. So when I say the fullness of the intent, that fullness of the intent is that we do it the way he would do it. Let this mind be in you, Philippians 2:5, that was in Yeshua Messiah. When we talk about spirit, understand here it says Elohim is spirit. So what's it saying? Is he wind? Is he breath? Is he breeze? Is he all those other things that we talked about? No, we're talking about here that other piece of it, which is the intrinsic nature. Elohim is. In other words, instead of saying you're a carpenter, you're a plumber, you're a painter, you're a teacher, you're a mother, you're a father, Elohim is the intrinsic nature we're supposed to get. It's his full essence is that nature. And you can have and embrace that nature in you. My argument has always been that the reason we will see him as he is because we will be like him. In other words, we will be completely changed in our nature. Not just spiritually, but physically. Just like the amoeba, all of a sudden being transformed into a human being, will now understand what it is to be a human being. The whole point is, though, we will not be changed into being like him physically if we have not already become like him in our nature, spiritually, in our intrinsic being. Because he's not going to wrap this Yetzer Hara self-gratification nature in an incorruptible body. Why put a corruptible nature in an incorruptible body? We need to develop and embrace and transform into his incorruptible nature. to be in an incorruptible body. And that's when we go back to the first verses we were reading in 1 John chapter 5, where it says, those who have gone through this process, those do not sin, because there's nothing to touch anymore, because you now have an incorruptible nature. So when he was manifested to take away our sins, it's not just that he takes it away and thinking, well, he nailed it to the cross, blah, blah, blah. No, his nature is incorruptible. He was manifested so that you would know that if you embrace that nature, there would be no sin. Because you'd have an uncorrupted or incorruptible nature. And therefore, you would not choose to do something that goes against Torah. When it says he was manifested to you, what was manifested to you? Oh, that Yeshua is the Messiah? Well, what does that do for you? Nothing. So you know he was the Messiah. If nothing else happens, it did nothing for you. It's a piece of information. It's just information. However, if you know he's the Messiah, and you understand what he desires, and you understand the fullness of the intent of that knowledge, that it would come into your life to make you be motivated to change into his image, now it means something. Now there's power there. What does staying in him mean? Staying in his nature, staying in his mindset, staying in his behavioral pattern. If you do those things, you don't sin. Everyone sinning has neither seen him nor known him. In other words, you have really not understood. Because if you saw him and you knew him, how many times have you ever said to somebody who accused you of something, who ever said, you know me better than that. I thought you knew me better than that. Well, when you sin, you show you really don't know him. You don't know why he came. You don't know why he suffered and died. You don't know why he's sitting at the right hand. You don't know any of that stuff. Because if you did, it would overwhelm you with the desire to change.